Isn't that the statement that was used at the end of our scripture reading this morning? That when we see the evidence of God, we cannot fail to say, God is amongst us. The Israelites knew that. They came to that place where they knew that God was amongst them. But even then, over and over again, they had to be reminded and called to be reliant on the place of God in their lives. Not of Moses, not of any other human being, but the presence of the mystery of God that continues to overwhelm us as we come to rely on the presence of the Holy. You know, as clergy, we get all sorts of phone calls during the week. Some good, some not so good. This week I've received numbers of phone calls from folks in our own congregation who have either relapsed or have lost their job, or something has happened to them in their own lives. A grandma died. They've had to fly back to bury their mother. All sorts of things that are going on in their lives, and I truly am overwhelmed by the knowledge that they come back to this water of life, to this place to have their spiritual needs met, even in the midst of disaster. The Israelites in our story had to be reminded that they needed to tap the stone so that the stone would crumble and water would flow from it. No matter what's going on in our lives this morning, we see that as a stone, and you and I in our spiritual power can tap that stone and see water flowing from it. The overwhelming, refreshing water of life that is available for all of us. That water of life that's not just in a glass that we get to drink, but the water of life that is sustaining us and encouraging us and reminding us over and over again that we are not abandoned, but that God is indeed with us. Isn't that the great mystery of our faith? That no matter what, God is still constant if we continue to tap in to that place of spirit that is within our bodies and within our lives. And the mercy of God, that when we do tap into those places, God does not disappoint us, but rather God comes through every time. Oh, it may not be that we get a new job. It isn't that we would raise those from the dead that have been dead and buried. But that overwhelmingly, over and over again, no matter what our circumstances, God is with us. And the grace of God helps us through to the other side. Moses never did get to see the promised land. He must have been extremely frustrated. I think I would have been really annoyed if I'd have taken these group of people with all of their complaints. Of course, that's none of us here.
Right.
I'm not talking about us this morning.
All right. Good thing.
But if we'd have taken this group of people with all of their complaints and journeyed with them for 40 years around that roundabout,
God help us.
wondering which exit to take,
That's right.
wandering around and listening to the complaints and the grumbles and having to prove to them over and over again that God was still present even in the midst of disaster.
Amen.
Wow.
Amen.
And never got to see the promised land.
That's right.
He saw it from a distance. I think that's where we're going.
That's right.
But he never got to see it. He never got to land in the promised land. But Moses remained faithful in the midst of everything. In the midst of everything, Moses remained faithful to the mystery and the mercy of God, knowing that as we tap into those places of our own spirituality, water of life replenishes us and fulfills us. Sisters and brothers, as we come back to this place this morning, looking for water of life, the water that will be with us, rely not on a human being, but rely on the presence of God that is always with us. The presence of God that is manifest through you as we share with one another. The water of life as we match our wants and our needs. The water of life that when there is crisis in our lives, we have a community that we can pray with us. And when we respond and we hear God answering our prayer, we can come back with thanksgiving, knowing that surely God is in our midst, is around us.
Yes.
That water of life that can sustain us in the good and the not so good. The water of life that asks us to be faithful, not just when there's crisis in our lives, but at all times in our lives. And know that today, you and you and you and me are the water of life that people in our world are looking for as they ask, is God still among us? I pray that we might be able to respond, yes, God is in our midst. And because of that, we'll get to see the promised land. We'll get to arrive on the other side. We'll get past that rock, that brick, that whatever it is that we need to dissolve in our lives this morning. So I invite you, as I invite us every week, in this journey of Lent, to discover the mystery, to engage in the mystery, not to avoid the mystery, not to allow the mystery to become overwhelming, not to believe that somehow the mystery should not be entered into. In our house group, during this season of Lent, I was sharing with Reverend Pat that we've discovered that the more we enter into the mystery, the more we find out about God, the more we discover about God's presence in ourselves. So live the mystery, but know that in the mystery there is a grace, a mercy that will see us through. God's blessing this morning. And would you pray with me? Living and holy God, thank you that we are reminded that as your people we will go through the ups and downs of life, that we will complain, that we will grumble, that we will question, where are you, God, in the midst of all of this? Just as the chosen ones complained and grumbled and asked, even when they knew that the circumstances before were worse than they were in now. And yet you, in your grace, provided living water, food for the day. So we come to rely on you, God. And we come before you thanking you that as we really seriously contemplate the mystery of God, that as we enter into that mystery, we see the evidence of your mercy, guiding us and leading us through to the other side. Help us to taste of that water of life this morning, the water that Jesus offers us, the water that means that we will never thirst again. And in that invitation is an implication that that water will sustain us as we remain faithful to the journey. God's blessing, and now may the words that have come from my mouth not return to you, God, without feeding us, inspiring us, challenging us, reminding us of the mystery and the mercy of God in Jesus Christ. Amen.